instead of teaching kids just to memorize a word by sight, if we teach kids to map that word, to break it down into all of its sounds, to identify the irregular spelling, that is a far more effective way of teaching kids to learn those words. And there are stats out there, kids might need about 500 exposures to a word in order to memorize it. But if we teach them to map the word, they can learn that word in as little as 3 to 5 exposures to that word. It's just a completely different way of teaching kids those words.
Welcome to Rainbow Skies for New Teachers, where we're all about bite-sized tips and simple strategies for bright and busy new teachers.
If you're in your first few years of your career and want to make the rollercoaster ride of teaching more fun, streamlined and stress-free, you're in the right place.
We're Ashley and Alicia, the dynamic duo from Rainbow Sky Creations, and we're excited to be your teacher mentors on the go. There are rainbows ahead, my friend.
And together, we're unstoppable. Let's get into today's episode.
Rainbow Sky Creations acknowledges the traditional owners of the land we have recorded this podcast on, the Dharawal and Whadjuk Noongar people. We pay our respects to their elders past and present and extend that respect to all Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander cultures.
You are listening to the Rainbow Skies for New Teachers podcast, and I am so glad that you hit play on this episode because you are in for a treat. Today we have not one, but two guests, Tam and Jez, otherwise known as Mr. and Mr. Learning Bee. Now, you're not going to be unfamiliar with these two, most probably, especially if you are an Aussie teacher, because they are making such a difference in the Australian teacher space. They've created a platform called the Hive, and it is a game changer for teachers. On today's episode, we're going to chat a little bit about the Hive, but we're also going to talk about evidence-based activities and lessons for our students and how we need to teach according to how our brains actually work. Tam is so passionate in this area, and she has taught Jez, her husband, all about it so he can then code and create different resources and tools for teachers to make this easier in their classrooms. We also talk about the future of education, what we all would like to see change, how we want to make lives better for teachers, and so much more. There is even a fun little quiz at the end where we quiz Jez, who is the non-teacher of the group, about a few little teaching things, and we see how well he does. You're going to love today's episode. Welcome to Tam and Jez. Tam, my dear friend, if you could describe yourself as a teacher in 3 words, what would they be?
Okay, so I think fun would be one of the words. I love just getting kids laughing and being silly and building relationships with them that way. High expectations, technically 2 words, but I like to think I run a pretty tight ship. Some might call me a bit strict, but yeah, I have high expectations in terms of like classroom management and behavior and things like that. And organized would be my 3rd word. I like everything to have its place, and I feel very stressed if I'm not organized. So yeah, those would probably be my 3 main words.
We can totally see that as knowing you as a friend and also through all of your wonderful social media. So Jez, tell us, what is it like being married to a teacher?
A good question. I'd probably say fun. There are pretty high expectations and it's very organized around it.
That was a great way to answer. I feel like if we asked my husband that, he would not have been so polite.
I will also add, I've never in my life seen so much craft paraphernalia in one place. Since I was at school, probably. There's just so much stuff that Tam has here to do, all her resource creation and all the social media stuff. There's like the wardrobe behind us. There's nothing except school crafty stuff in there. But that's one thing I've learned.
It's a bit like I'm just popping down to Officeworks, or I've just gone onto Amazon and bought a whole lot of stuff, but don't worry, we've got the Prime membership, so it's free delivery. It's a bit like that.
Exactly that, but without the notice in advance. When you go out and then pick up this giant package, that's just arrived.
Tell me, was your childhood like that? Because your mum is a teacher too. So did she have lots of craft supplies?
If Amazon was around when I was back at home, then yes, it would have been very similar. I don't remember as much in the way of craft supplies. I think what I do remember is just the concept of always being on as a teacher. That's what is the main thing I recall. She was, I don't know, there are a few professions like teaching where you have to be on for so long, not just in the classroom in front of the kids, but parents and at home as well, doing the planning stuff. For me, that's my recollection, but she loved it.
I remember as well, like so people who know our story, we dated way back in the day, and then we had a little pause for a decade. And then, but when we were dating the first time, I was at the start of my career, and I remember being around at Jez's house, and his mum was on year 2 at the time. I remember I was fascinated seeing how other teachers were doing things, and she had all of I can so vividly see her assessments that she was doing at night she'd have it on the dining table. And so I guess I saw that as well before I was even fully in the classroom. As we all know, it's so much more than just being in the classroom. It's all the stuff outside of the hours as well that you end up doing.
You
did some marking.
I did some marking when I was old enough to know what I was talking about.
I love that.
There you go. There's one example of being married to a teacher or having a teacher in the family, how everyone comes together and helps out and supports one another. And I think that's one big thing we're all about at Rainbow Sky is supporting new teachers. And being Tam, you're in a situation where you were seeing Jez's mum as an experienced teacher and you're coming as the new teacher. Now, with all your experience, what's one piece of advice you would give to new teachers listening out there?
If along the same line is basically get into as many classrooms as you can. I feel like the best way that I learned so many of the strategies that I now use was just going into the classrooms of other more experienced teachers in my school, or if I was lucky enough to go and visit other schools in the surrounding area, and just like being a sponge and absorbing and seeing all of the different ways that they were teaching things. And even I would give the same advice to a teacher if you've been teaching 10 years, 15 years, 20 years, because we never know it all and you can learn so much from your colleagues. So I would really prioritize going into other classrooms, watching a lesson, seeing how they're running different parts of the day. I think it's one of the best ways that you can learn as a teacher.
Yeah, we always say the best PD is the teacher down the hall. And it is so true because we are real silos as teachers. We're in our own classroom with our own class. And if you don't proactively get out there and watch what your colleagues are doing, you can miss out on all of that wonderful professional development, really, ideas and inspiration and ways to do things that you may not have ever thought of before, but could be a massive game changer for you.
Yeah, totally.
So speaking of that, could you give us one secret strategy that you use in your classroom to help with classroom management? Something that teachers could hear now, listening to this podcast, and implement into their classrooms tomorrow.
So one of the things that I like to do is it's so simple. It's literally just varying my voice and the volume of my voice. And I've been so guilty of this as well in the past, but you've got the class is quite rowdy and they're working, but there's a lot of noise. And then I raise my voice to be heard above them all. And then all that does is elevate the noise further. And it's a sort of chain reaction. So some of the things that I would do is, for example, if we were moving between different activities, and so I was explaining the next thing, I would just whisper all of the instructions. And the added benefit is that it's a really great engagement tactic as well, because they hang on to every word. They're listening as you're whispering, and then it sets this calm tone as they move to the next activity. Or sometimes I would just not even use my voice at all. And so if I was trying to get their attention, I would just do some actions out the front, and gradually some of the kids would pick up on it until everyone was just doing the actions and I hadn't had to say a word and there was silent to get their attention. Yeah, just thinking about how you can use your voice creatively in different ways. First of all, it will engage your kids more, but second of all, it's a great kind of way of managing noise level in the classroom as well.
Yeah, it's a very good piece of advice. I think sometimes we get stuck on the only form of communication is using our words, but there are so many other tools that we have in our physiology to be able to communicate to kids. And that strategy is it's effective from kindergarten all the way up to high school, if we've got any high school teachers even listening. So it's a very effective one to use.
We know your husband's listening, Alicia, because he is #1 podcast listener. So Tyrone, you could use this in your classroom.
That's right, darling. Try typing it up on your interactive whiteboard and getting them to read it. I'm sure his students would love that.
Actually, that is a fun idea. I've heard of teachers doing that. They type up directions or things that they want their students, in the older grades, things that they want their students to know, and that they're reading it. Have we spoken about that on the podcast before, Alicia?
We have, on engagement ideas.
All right, let's switch gears a little bit now and let's talk about providing evidence-based practices in your classroom. Now, Tam, you are so passionate about making sure that you're providing evidence-based resources in Australia and worldwide. But what does evidence-based actually mean, and why is this important?
it's exactly what it sounds like. It's based on evidence and it's based on research. So it's not just leaving things to chance or doing things the way that they've always been done, but it's about using strategies that we actually know have been proven to be an effective way for students to learn. And this can obviously relate to literacy and numeracy. And there's a lot of talk at the moment in terms of evidence-based literacy, particularly with like the science of reading, but it can also relate to behavior, classroom management, any area of teaching. Another example is learning and understanding more about how the brain works and the different parts of the brain, the amygdala being our fight or flight response. And the more that we understand the science of the brain, the more we can then help our students to manage their emotions and inject that into our classroom management. So I think, yeah, it's basically not just doing things the way that maybe we saw things done when we were in school. It's actually looking at what is the research showing is the most effective way of teaching kids and how they learn.
Yeah, I completely agree. I think there's definitely a movement at the moment of really looking at the evidence and the research behind what is the why behind what we do in the classroom or what we're doing as educators. So taking that on board, let's look at the science of reading, because we know you've got so many amazing resources and tools out there regarding this evidence. What is something that you were surprised to learn about that you think our audience would benefit from in relation to the science of reading?
I've got a couple of things that I think really surprised me. First of all, this concept of that reading and writing are actually man-made concepts. What I mean is like speech develops naturally just through exposure. And we see that with kids as like toddlers and as they're learning to speak. They're just immersed in language, and as we're talking around them, they gradually learn to speak. But the same cannot be said for reading and writing. Those skills actually need to be explicitly taught because our brain isn't hardwired in the same way to be able to just magically learn to read and write. And so this kind of idea of balanced literacy is where you just expose kids to lots of rich texts and they're just going to learn and by osmosis. And that's not how the brain actually learns to read. So I think, yeah, once I've understood that, it made so much sense why we need to be explicitly teaching those skills to students in a really systematic way so that they're building up those skills. I think the other thing that really surprised me was the science of reading, or the science, I don't even really want to say science of reading because it's so much more broad than that. It's like the science of learning. It's really looking at how does the brain learn new concepts, and it's getting a lot more attention at the moment. So it's easy to think, oh, this is quite new, but this body of research has been around for decades. And that was really shocking to me when I first really understood that, because if it's been around for decades, why have we not been teaching kids to read and write using what all of these cognitive scientists have found out about how the brain learns to read and write? And without going into too much detail, particularly if anyone's listened to the Soul to Story podcast, which is a really great podcast that unpacks the kind of why that is in terms of basically big companies standing to make a lot of profits from more of a balanced literacy approach. And yeah, it's quite scary. That's infiltrated US, UK, Australia, New Zealand in terms of how teachers have been trained to teach kids to read and write. But yeah, I think that was another thing that really surprised me, that this is not new information. This is research that's been around for decades.
Yeah, it comes down to whose voice is loud enough. And if you've got the money to back you, those big firms can really push something that isn't necessarily in line with how we learn. So that being said, if we're looking at how our brains learn to read, and we could put the reading umbrella over it, what is something you would love to tell teachers we should start to move away from when it comes to teaching kids how to read, how to write?
This is a big one for me because it's something I did for majority of my career so far, because it's only something I've learned about in recent years, but that's this concept of sight word flashcards, or just sight words in general. I was very lucky that from very early on in my career, I was exposed to really great training in terms of how to teach kids to read and write. And so a lot of the things I was doing from early on were quite evidence-based, but I was taught to teach these words.
Yeah.
Not they're irregular and you just got to memorize them. And I think any teacher who's taught the early years and you've had these lists of sight words and you send them home and you practice them, and the kids, some of them get, and a lot of them, there are just these words and they cannot get them. And so once I understood this concept of heart words, or there's a few different ways of explaining them, but the concept is basically that almost every word can be sounded out, and there's usually just one part of it that's irregular. And instead of teaching kids just to memorize the word by sight, if we teach kids to map that word, to break it down into all of its sounds, to identify the irregular spelling, That is a far more effective way of teaching kids to learn those words. And there are stats out there. Kids might need about 500 exposures to a word in order to memorize it. But if we teach them to map the word, they can learn that word in as little as 3 to 5 exposures to that word. It's just a completely different way of teaching kids those words. Yeah, that would be my main thing, that if I think back to my early years, far out. I wish I could just go back and teach those words in that way, because it just makes so much more sense as well. Yeah.
Yeah, it does. I did a little test with my daughter the other day because I've been doing a little bit more research on the science of reading. Tam's taught me a lot over the years, and I was doing a little course and she was having trouble with a particular word. And it was one of those words that you would deem as a sight word back in the balanced literacy approach. So we got out the word mapping and we mapped it. She had a go, and then she came back the next day and she did it. She knows that word now. And it was really that process. Whereas before, I've taught kindy over the years, and we would have said that word quite a few times. She would have repeated it after me. Then she would have gone and found the word. Then she would have made the word. And it could have taken weeks or months for her to eventually learn that word. But really, she maps that word 3 times and she had it. So it works.
That's amazing. It's so empowering for them as well. The sense of achievement they feel when they've got that word, it's great. It's just setting the kids up for success.
Yeah,
Yeah, for
absolutely.
sure. I think that's what the science of learning really is. It's about setting our kids up for success in the classroom.
And if you're giving them the steps and it makes sense to them, if you're looking at sight words, for example, and it's like, you know that first sound because you know what that sound makes with that letter, you know that end sound, but this middle sound is a bit different, and we're just going to focus and learn on that. And they go, oh, that totally makes sense. So then you can see how the brain starts firing off those neurons. Okay, I'm going to make a new little pathway for that to make sense. It's a bit mind-blowing. And I think you touched on something where in education, you might do things that weren't necessarily the right way to do it. And if you go back over it and you get stuck in the guilt, you'll be a bit of a miserable teacher and you'll be a bit bitter. But you got to shake it off like we do with life. We make mistakes, we learn from them. We're now better informed. So you take that information and how can you apply it into the classroom? I think with that being said, we know we've got teachers who have been in the classroom for years and they've experienced that kind of epiphany moment of, oh my gosh, I've been doing it wrong. They might start to feel overwhelmed. They might start to feel like, I'm the worst teacher in the world. But what would be one piece of advice that you could give them right now as just like a little bit of information or a pep talk to say, it's okay?
I would just say start small, and it's okay to learn alongside the kids. I still remember when I was first trained, as I said, I was lucky it was very early on. And I remember being trained in all of this meta language of like phoneme, grapheme, split digraph, all of these words, schwa. First of all, I was trying to remember all these words. And second of all, we were being told, teach these concepts to the kids. And we were all looking, I remember us all just thinking, there's no way that the kids are going to be able to remember all these words. Spoiler alert, they absolutely did. And I would then do a lot of demonstration lessons with my kindergarten class. They were a kind of gifted education class. So they were working a little bit above, but they were still 5 and 6 years old. And I would have grade 1 all the way up to grade 6 teachers coming in and watching these phonics lessons, and these kids were reeling off, oh, that's an art control bell, that's a diphthong, it's schwa there, blah, 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 all these different things, because they actually can pick it up and it makes so much sense to them. But when I was first starting out, I learned those terms alongside the kids, and it's totally fine to be doing that. And I've trained so many teachers in these strategies, and they've said the same thing. I'm learning it alongside the kids. And the more that they're teaching it, the more, as we know, the more we teach things, the more it goes into our own brains as well. And I think as well, I would just say it's so rewarding when you change something up, and it can be a bit scary to change something up and do something differently to the way you've always done it. But it's so rewarding when you see these things start to click with the kids. And I've had teachers who've taught kindergarten for 10 years. They've taught using a lot of these old strategies. They've implemented some of these new strategies and they've gone, oh my goodness, I cannot believe what my kids are able to do compared to what they were doing with these sort of older, outdated practices. So when you start to see it click for the kids, that's also, it's a really motivating factor to keep going with it, because you can see the evidence shows this is how they're going to learn. And when you see that actually happening before your eyes, it's really amazing.
Yes, I completely agree with you. Sounds like you gave us our little pep talk, and you can see that leadership, the leader in you coming out of being like, it's okay, just keep going with it. You've got this. We know this will work, and you'll start to see it happening. Now, you two, being Tam and Jez, have created something phenomenal, I feel, and I know Ashley agrees with me, in the education space. And as we're talking to you now, Tam, we can just see how passionate you are about educating, about informing, about empowering and equipping teachers.
We think of it as a digital teaching partner. What that means is that you can do all your planning, you can get resources, you can really get set for your day from one platform. And we've basically tried to pull in as many things as you would need to get through your day in the best way possible and put it into this digital platform. The key thing about it is that we've been working really closely with teachers. So we're not just out here in a silo thinking, oh, this would be great, this would be great. Everything we do is informed by feedback from our members because we actually want to make this something that's really useful in the classroom and not something that you just use for a bit and be like, yeah, that was cool, but won't actually really help me day to day. We want this to be genuinely something that will empower you and help you be a more efficient, more gooder teacher.
I think as well, a lot of it came about from Jez watching me preparing for my teaching day or creating resources for my students and just almost tearing your hair out going, there is just so many ways that we could automate that and we could make that so much more efficient and save you so much time and make it a more effective activity for the kids as well or planning things. So I think, yeah, it's been like my teacher brain and Jez's tech brain coming together and trying to solve problems that we're seeing teachers face.
Yes, I know so many teachers, friends of mine that have the Hive up in their classroom all day, every day. And I know that is what you aim for the Hive to be, that assistant for teachers, and it's theirs, their go-to place. Jez, I'm really interested to know, what part of the Hive do you think that the students, the kids, would like best?
I think it's hard to go past the little apps or learning tools, widgets, whatever you want to call them, that we've together built and put into the Hive. So things like phonics tools, literacy tools, maths tools, accounting and stuff, but also we've started to put some games in there as well. And I think one that was a hit from the start was what we called Beetle, which is a similar concept to Wordle, but it uses decodable words and they can be any length. They're not restricted to the 5-letter word. So you can, any length that you want. And the kids just go bananas for that. As soon as we released that, we started to get like feedback from teachers with little snippets, hearing kids and like just absolute joy that they had when they got it right. The classroom was cool.
Well, that sounds really fun, doesn't it?
Yeah, I love it.
A sucker for Wordle, for sure. Throwing it to you, Tam, what is something in the Hive that you wished you'd had when you were teaching? I know you've made this beautiful platform, but what's something in there you go, oh my gosh, I salivate over having this now?
I think it would be hard to go past the visual timetable. And I feel like when we first created it, there was nothing like it out there. And I hear all the evidence of why visual timetables are so important, but I'm going to be completely honest. When I was in the classroom, I was so bad at keeping my visual timetable updated, or I'd lose bits of paper, different parts.
Data cards.
Things would change and, it was just painful. So to have this kind of visual timetable that keeps the kids on track, they know exactly what's coming, it sets them up for success for the day, but it also links to all of the parts of your day. So for phonics, I would be able to link to my phonics PowerPoint or my phonics apps or the read aloud that I was using or whatever it is, and to have it all there at a click of a button. Oh my gosh, it would have just saved me so much time. And then what Jez has done this year is like taken that original concept and built it out into a full digital planner, which teachers now, like, it's just ready for the whole term, basically. Yeah, such a game changer for me if I'd been in the classroom with that.
That's phenomenal. Right then and there, you're saving so many teachers time, energy. And I think I've even seen it where you've got that timetable and you've gone and inputted already like your Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday, Friday. So that whole element that you bring in, Jez, of that tech brain of being like, why are you guys not automating this? Come on, get with the 21st century.
Look for shortcuts that are going to help you.
Yeah.
Underpinned a lot of our thinking has been like me telling Tam, like our focus groups and stuff like that. Think big in terms of what you want to see in the Hive and don't feel like you're restrained by the way that you've traditionally done things in the classroom. Because really, with this platform, we've designed it so that it's able to be intuitive. Don't feel restrained in thinking about what it can be and how it can work in the classroom for you.
Yeah, I feel like when we were talking about the digital planner, there's still a lot more that we want to add to it. And Jez was like, in my mind, I'm still thinking in the brains of my paper planner or my paper program or an Excel type thing. And I'm still thinking along those lines. And Jez has to keep saying to me, think beyond that. We can actually go beyond what you've always done, or even like things like Jez has watched me in the past try to manipulate PowerPoint to be interactive or to do things. And
It's killed me.
it makes Jez's eye twitch watching me try to make basically PowerPoint into a website. Although I remember when you did the number line, I was like, oh, it'd be so cool if we could show the jumps and then show when it jumps by 10 and then by ones. But I was like, oh, it's probably not possible. Until of course it's possible. So now I feel like I've probably gone too far the other way where I go, I've got this new idea. Can you build it? Thinking he can build everything. But so far, you've never said no. If you just
I've just been grumpy sometimes.
I remember you asking, I was with a group of teachers and Jez was there and he asked the question, he said, but think about anything. Just tell us what it would be in a perfect world. I've recently done some work with Canva. I've been a part of some of their focus groups over there. And one thing that they do when they come up with a problem is they say, okay, here is a piece of paper, fold it into 8 and come up with as many solutions as you can. You can draw, write, whatever, and think as crazy as you want. Like it can be as wild as you want. And then you share your ideas. And the ideas people come up with, they actually say that person's idea, you could do it with that and combine it. And the tech people are actually incredible, but they say that one of the things that makes them incredible and makes Canva, the platform, incredible is that they don't put any disclaimers saying like, we can't do this. They have the mindset that anything is possible. And then that is where they go from. So it sounds like you're the same, Jez. And I love that.
Oh, yeah. But it's not always easy to do because we're so used to working with constraints and imbalances.
Yes.
So it can take a bit of practice to become comfortable saying, throw that away. Let's go as wide as we want. And then once we've got all our ideas out in the open, we haven't felt inhibited in any way. We can then whittle it down and figure out this is probably going to be the best way forward, do our testing benchmarks, all that kind of stuff to figure out the best solution. But you have to go wide at the start. And it's such an unlock for innovation and people's creativity.
Yeah, it sounds amazing.
Sounds like it's very exciting at your home office, and you must have some very interesting dinner chats that go late into the night.
Yeah, I find that I am most ready to chat about kind of pie in the sky stuff as we're falling asleep.
Well, the amount of times if you were using like, I don't know, I can't even think of an example, but yeah, XYZ tool. And what do you reckon teachers need when they're doing this? I'm like, oh my goodness, it's 11 o'clock. I just want to go to sleep. I love that we're thinking about this, but can we please do this tomorrow morning?
Especially as parents of a new baby, that's exactly what you need. Someone else interrupting your sleep.
Yeah.
Tam, how do you explain to Jez what teachers actually need? Because Jez, you're not a teacher, although you've lived with one pretty much your entire life, your mum and now Tam. But how do you manage to say, okay, so this is how teachers think and feel, and then bring that to life through coding?
I think it's getting easier. I think there's still times where we're talking at such a disconnect because I'm like, but this is just what teachers, I don't know how to explain it. It's just what teachers do or what teachers think about. Yeah, it's still a bit of a challenge at times, but I do think that Jez is thinking more and more like a teacher. I feel like I hear in the way he's creating that you talk about like cognitive overload. We want to reduce that. Or there was a time you were watching, I think he'd seen the 10 frames app that we built and he was watching a video of a kid using it. He's, oh, that's way too high. I need to bring that down so kids can reach it better and adapt it all the app. Just things like that, actually, I don't always even think about. So I think I have to just remember sometimes that Jez hasn't been in a classroom. And so I have to just practice patience and really breaking down the actual steps. But I do think you are thinking more like a teacher now.
Yeah. I think for me, it's just been listening and learning that listening is probably the most important thing that I can do. And then as Tam said, by doing that, I will get a better and better understanding. So then I think along with listening, it's for me throwing away preconceptions that I had. It's been a long time since I was in the classroom. So things have changed and I can barely remember a huge amount of it. But I mean preconceptions for how things should be done. If I was to take something that's applied in the classroom and find something similar to it that's applied in the adult world. So trying to get rid of those and listen and get better and better. And then basically finding a balance between, as we were talking about before, understanding what teachers know and enjoy right now, but then bringing in that digital innovative side in a way that's easily digestible and genuinely beneficial in the classroom.
I think as well, Jez is, as we said earlier, a big part of the way we've built this platform is alongside teachers and we've got a little focus group, but we also are like constantly chatting with teachers who are members. And so I think the more that Jez has chatted with teachers and seen how things are working in the classroom, you'll often just put a question out of like when we were building a calendar app. What do you do with a calendar? I was like, I don't know, like you put the birthdays and you put when the swimming carnival is, and we call it a little party thing when it's a birthday. But yeah, that took a while for you to get your head around like what a kid-friendly calendar was going to look like.
I mean, sometimes whether it's you or whether it's with our focus groups, your teachers just feel like they have to dumb things down for me so I can understand what really is the crux of what we're trying to do with this. And what are the interactions that need to be done? Because ultimately, like, they need to turn into keystrokes on the keyboard and specific actions in the app. Yeah. I've just loved it though, learning everything. I thought I would be learning a lot about coding over the past 3 years, and I have, but I feel like I probably learned more teaching and learning and being in the classroom.
You guys are the sweetest, but I love how it's the yin and the yang. You guys have complemented each other so well in terms of being innovative and visionaries and seeing your two worlds combined to make life so much more refreshing and easier for educators.
All right, so let's just take a bit of a turn and think about the future a little bit, because I know, Tam, you're really passionate about education, and Jez, you are now too, with the influence of Tam and the Hive and all of the things that you guys have been doing together and the incredible platform that you've created. So if you had a magic wand, Tam, what would one big change in education be that you'd like to see?
I feel like it's quite an obvious answer, but it doesn't change that I'd still do it. It would be just to reduce the admin load on teachers, because I think we all know that admin load just gets bigger and bigger every year. And we're seeing how much more burnt out teachers are because they're not just having the chance to be in the classroom doing what sparks joy, which is teaching kids and having all of those aha moments with the kids. And you have to really be passionate about teaching to want to be a teacher. And it is the best job in the whole wide world. And so I would just love to see ways that teachers can be able to spend more time doing the things that they love about teaching, the reasons that they got into teaching, and not be so weighed down by all of the other stuff that ends up coming along with being a teacher as well.
I'd like to see that too. Jez, what about you? What's something that you feel needs to change for teachers?
I think what I've seen since living at home and seeing how mum taught, or at least the at-home perspective, there was just so much. So firstly, after hours stress about teaching, but also figuring out what am I going to teach? When am I going to teach that? How am I going to actually deliver it to the kids? And that's just an ongoing thing for teachers every day. So many decisions need to be made from 9 to 3. It's a long block of time to figure out what am I going to impart upon these kids. And as someone who's not a teacher, it's just mind-boggling to me that that's something that teachers wear on their shoulders, and that's huge. I would love to see that burden reduced. I think there's a lot that technology can do to help, firstly with figuring out, I'm going to use this resource or watch that video or do this thing to teach this specific thing, but also tech can help the side of things where it's more organization. So you need this resource now, so I'm going to deliver it to you right now. Or being more present with you in the classroom so that your brain isn't loaded with everything for the whole day and trying to know when it's supposed to be done. But tech can really help with that. And I don't know, I think this has been a massive driver for what we're doing with the Hive. As we mentioned before, we've melded our brains together in a way, and Tam's provided so much in high quality, considered resources out there that are really useful. And I guess I've taken those, tried to think about how can we get these to teachers at the right time and in a way that is easy.
Yeah, for sure. I think that taking that burden is a really great and an important thing that we need to do. Alicia, what about you? What's one thing that you'd like to see change in education? Just one thing, okay?
I know, it's a really big question because I feel like there's so many facets to it. I'm actually in complete agreements of administration. I think I'm just going to join that bandwagon because that was probably one of the reasons that led to my feeling of overwhelm and burnout. And I've used this analogy a bit of thinking of a bag of rocks, and I felt like my bag was filled with so many rocks that I couldn't get any out. And when I'm hearing you talk, Jez, in terms of the burden that you see teachers are carrying, and it just makes me realize how important it is that we're having discussions with people of different skill sets so they can see it from a different perspective. Like when you're talking, I just see there's an element of your qualities where you're very open-minded. And I think, Tam, you're very much the same too. But you're very open-minded in terms of going, okay, this is the situation you're in. This is what teachers are dealing with. This is what I know in my world of software engineering. How can I meld that together to make something that's going to reduce that burden. And I think we see that time and time again in different like professions and on current affairs shows and 60 Minutes and so forth. But I think anything that alleviates that burden of time taken away from teaching to the students is what we ultimately want, because we know through connection with students, and for you to have the time to make the connection, you've got that stress being offloaded in terms of all the things you have to do. I think that would be a huge change to education.
Yeah, we want our kids to be going into classrooms with teachers that are regulated. We've been talking a lot about this inside our membership recently, Transform Your First Years, and how to deal with unregulated students. And we've been talking about teachers and how we can feel unregulated. And I know myself, when I was in the classroom, that piling on of things, and the phone was always ringing, and there's students that need you and you want to be there with them 100%, but then there was this to-do list of all these other things. That is a real recipe to burnout. It's a recipe for you to feel unregulated, for you not to be your most patient, happy self. And I know with kids at school age now, I want my kids to go into a classroom with a teacher that is so happy, that does have time to listen to them. And I think that if we continue going on this trajectory of what we're doing in the classroom and piling all of this onto teachers, we're not going to have kids that feel listened to. We're not going to have kids that are able to create those connections with the adult that's in the classroom, because they just have too much to bear.
I feel like if they're not going to give all teachers a personal assistant to deal with all the administration, then we need people like yourselves who have made things like the Hive, that amazing platform that works as the digital assistant. So thank you. Thank you, Tam and Jez.
All right. So to end this episode, we have this really fun idea to give Jez a quiz about some of the teacher things to see what he has actually learned over the last year and a bit of creating the Hive. I'm so excited about this. We've all got questions ready for you. So we're going to throw them at you. Just give them a red hot crack and we'll see how you go.
What's the passing grade?
100 out of 100. 100%.
What is the difference between a grapheme and a phoneme?
Okay, graphemes are individual letters and you put them together to make sounds, and the sounds are phonemes. A example would be, I don't know, ear, E-E-R. Like that's the graphemes are E-E-R, but you could also do I-E-R or E-R-E. Yeah. I
Correct.
feel like that's right, but my way of explaining it's not very good.
No, you've got it. That's good.
Well done. I'm impressed.
That's 1 out of 1. Tracking well.
I always said to my kids, the phoneme is like the phone, what you listen to. So it's the sound that they make. I had that up on my wall for many years, Tam, because as I was trying to learn the language, I had it there so I could use it as well as the kids.
And a tip for grapheme is think of graphite in a lead pencil. So that's the written sounds. So phoneme and graph. Yeah, graphite for the grapheme. Well, little trick.
Quite like that. I remember that summer quiz.
All right, you ready? Crunch and sip. What is it?
Thought I knew, but I don't think it's right. Because we saw something on the project the other day where they were doing crunch and sip, but they were in the garden. I was like, that's not where crunch and sip happens. Crunch and sip is when you get your celery in your juice box and you sit cross-legged on the floor.
No, not juice box. It's water.
Sorry, no juice.
No juice. No. But celery, correct.
But what's the garden part? Like, why would you go out to the garden to do crunch and sip?
I think they were growing the fruit and vegetables.
See, I was fully confident with that question until the TV threw me.
And you'd soon discover that getting outside with humans, little humans, and a large group of them is just like balm for your soul. So food, water, outdoors, peace and tranquility for a teacher.
Yeah, only one liquid and that's water. No.
Yes. Okay, Tam, what have you got for him?
All right, I've got another spelling question for you. What is a schwa?
This is a hard one. I feel like it's a bit unfair. Tell us.
I remember this one. Schwa is a lazy sound. So what's an example? Dragon. Okay. The O in dragon, that's a lazy O because you don't say dragon, you say dragon.
Yeah, I would say you're almost correct. It's a lazy sound or it's trying to hide. So sometimes you don't even really say it at all. I actually say dragon is it's hiding. A lazy.
Because you go GN kind of.
Yeah. So you often see kids spell dragon without the O because it's hiding.
Yeah.
So a lazy one would be like mother. You don't say mother.
Oh, that's true. That's such a lazy sound.
All those sounds, baker, etc.
Water.
Are they all schwas?
They are, but I always say schwa is a little bit accent dependent because particularly like in the US, they really pronounce those I don't know how to do US accent.
That was perfect.
That was going to be my next question about the schwa and accent.
Yes.
Because the phonics, it's funny, we used to teach at an international school, Alicia and I, and we both taught grade 2 at different times. But the grade 2 there was more like our grade 1 here. So they were still doing a lot of phonics, and the kids in different classes would pronounce things slightly differently depending on where their teacher was from. So if they had an Irish teacher or a teacher from New Zealand or Australian or the UK, their sounds would all be slightly different.
I feel the Australian accent is full of schwas.
Yeah,
it is.
We're so lazy.
We are.
And timid. Lazy and timid.
Timid?
The O in dragon is a timid O.
Yeah.
Oh, I'm with you.
Welcome to our daily discussions in this office.
Alicia, do you have another question for Jez?
You've got to complete the sentence, okay? 1, 2, 3. Think of it as a chant. I'm trying to get your attention. 1, 2, 3.
Clock, 4 o'clock, rock.
No, do it again. And Alicia and Tam and I will answer it for you, Alicia.
1, 2, 3.
Eyes on me.
Audrey.
That was a song. If I played that song.
I don't know.
1, 2, 3, tell your hands, we're going to make
Yes.
Yeah.
Yeah, it is a song. If those lyrics are correct, but I can't say for sure if they are.
And teachers probably up with pop culture would actually be incorporating it into their classroom because music is really beneficial for learning. We'll give you one more chance. This is another chant one.
Okay.
Think of the rhyming element to this one. Hocus pocus.
You must focus.
Oh, pretty good. You could use that one.
Well, yeah.
We say, hocus pocus,
Everyone
focus.
Yeah.
And that has been on your Instagram many a time.
It has. I use that around Halloween every year. Good to know you're paying attention to
That's
social media.
No, Halloween is when I have my Instagram. Don't look through.
That's it. Okay, what about this? Second last question. What does RFF stand for? Yes. 2?
Face to base.
Yes. Relief from face to face. I know in New South Wales we call it RFF. Alicia was saying before, she doesn't know what RFF is, but I know what hers is called. DOT.
I knew it was DOT, but I don't know what DOT stands for.
Duties other than teaching.
Oh, I learned something new today.
Something from the West.
It makes you think you have to do something in RFF.
You do have to do something. Not you sitting around twiddling your thumb.
Oh, really? No, I'm kidding.
Yeah. Okay, Tam, do you have one more for Jez? He hasn't got 100% so far. You've done pretty well.
All right. How many phonemes are in the word stretching? I actually need to figure that out too myself, but
Why do you pick such a hard word?
because I didn't want to give you an easy one. There you go. I've written it out for you. How many phonemes?
Thank you for showing me how the word stretching is spelled.
For all the listeners out there, Alicia's got her head down. She's writing it down. I'm writing it down. I counted out the phonemes. Tam has got her head down writing it out. So let's see if he can work it out. It is very hard to say the amount of phonemes without actually seeing the word.
It is.
I think it's got 5.
Okay. What do you think they are?
No, that's probably, I don't know if this comes across well.
No, it doesn't. So we don't need to sound it out too much. Just
I think S 1, then T is 1, then R is 1.
Yep.
Then E is 1.
Yep.
So that's 4.
Yep.
PCH is 1.
What's that called?
It's a triptong.
No, it's a trigraph, but good try.
And then in is, I was going to say 1, but I think it's 2 now.
You're right. It's 2. Ing is a suffix, but it's actually 2 sounds.
E. So we're at 4, 5, 6, 7.
Do you know what? I'm going to give it to him because even though he got it wrong to start with, he self-corrected his way into the correct answer.
That's right. And we're all about learning from mistakes.
I agree. Correct. Well done, Jez. Do you know what? We're going to end the podcast here so Jez doesn't now ask us questions about coding. Thank you so much for coming on and chatting with us today, team Tam and Jez, Mr. and Mrs. Learning Bee. It's been so good. I'm glad we got to really chat about evidence-based research, how we can get that implemented in our classroom, some really good practical ideas for teachers, and of course, talking about the Hive and how much of a game changer it is.
Thanks so much.
Thank you so much for having us. It's been so much fun.
It's been great. Thank you.
You can really see how Tam and Jez really implement fun, that high expectation for students they're trying to help, and that organized nature into the Hive and everything that they do to help teachers. It was an absolute pleasure having them on the podcast. Not only are they dear friends of mine, and over the years, Tam has taught me many a thing about how the brain learns and how we need to change up our teaching in order to help this. But it was just great having a different perspective come on the podcast, someone who is not a teacher but sees all of the hard work that teachers do. I know that throughout this conversation, I really felt seen as a teacher, and I hope that you felt the same way. The link to the Hive and to Tam and Jez's socials, which is Mrs. Learning Bee, are all linked in the show notes if you want to check it out further or explore what they have to offer. Thank you so much to Tam and Jez for coming along, and thank you to you for listening. We appreciate each and every download that happens on this podcast. We are seeing it being spread far and wide, and honestly, it means so much to Alicia and I. It just is so exciting just to see that there's teachers out there that want to make a difference in the classrooms, that are dedicated to learning more and making their practice even better. So thank you to you. Thank you to Tam and Jez. And until next week, there are rainbows ahead, and together we're unstoppable.